I'm Janine Turner, founder of Constituting America. Welcome to our annual academic study entitled History Holds the Key to the Future. Or, as Shakespeare said, what's past is prologue. This year's study is entitled The Genius of America, A Journey into Our Republic, a study on Alexis De Tocqueville's Democracy in America. This essay is entitled The Trade of Seeking Official Positions in Certain Democratic Nations, Volume 2, Part 3, Chapter 20, pages 587 through 588 of the version of Democracy in America by the University of Chicago Press. Following the Money to Big Government by James P. Pinkerton. If the government is small, ambitious people seeking economic opportunity will tend to go where the action is, to the private sector. They will, in a phrase, follow the money. However, if the government is big, ambitious people are more likely to seek out careers in the public sector. This point is made in the second volume of Alexis De Tocqueville's classic work, Democracy in America. As with so many of De Tocqueville's insights, it's common sense, informed by first-hand observation. He spent nearly a year traveling through the U.S. at 1831 through 32, and armored further in erudition. As he wrote, quote, "In the United States, as soon as a man has acquired some education and pecuniary resources, he either endeavors to get rich by commerce or industry, or he buys land in the bush and turns pioneer," end quote. The author notes a distinctly American characteristic, quote, "All that he asks of the state is not to be disturbed in his toil and to be secure of his earnings," end quote. In other words, don't tread on me. However, Europe was different. As de Tocqueville wrote of the ambitious European, quote, "The first thing that occurs to him is to get some public employment," end quote. In Europe, public employment didn't just mean an income. It also meant power and privilege, the ability to lord it over others while perhaps wheedling a special favor out of some crowned head. De Tocqueville, himself a classical liberal, clearly preferred the American approach of small government, too poor to do favors for the connected. He contrasted, quote, "public employments that are few in number, ill-paid, and precarious," end quote, to, quote, "different lines of business that are numerous and lucrative," end quote. That, the Frenchman said, was a key difference between small government America and big government Europe. To de Tocqueville, the freedom to get into business for oneself was the key to equality as he defined it. That is, equality of opportunity as opposed to equality of result, sometimes today called equity. Back in the 1830s, American government was small. The federal government's share of economic output, what we now call GDP, was perhaps 3%. And the state's regulatory footprint was small as well, to the point of non-existent. In most places, if you wanted to start farming, well, you just started farming. No permit needed. By contrast, European governments were much larger, not just as a share of the economy, but as a share of the national mindset. Europe was, after all, the land of feudalism and centralized power. By contrast, the U.S. was about republicanism and expansion of the western frontier. It was always even freer over the next hill. De Tocqueville was ever loyal to France, and yet he wrote Democracy in America with an eye toward encouraging a new spirit of liberty in his homeland. Meanwhile, today, the U.S. has a much larger government. The federal government's share of the economy is more than 7 times what it was in de Tocqueville's era, around 23% of the GDP. And state and local governments are much larger too. Moreover, what's called the, quote, administrative state, end quote, has grown huge too in its ability to affect the economy, the workplace, the schools, even school bathrooms. Has life for Americans improved amidst this government expansion? Is our Constitution stronger? These are matters for debate, but it does appear that America has become more like Europe. So now plenty of Americans are able to make good careers for themselves as, quote, activists, end quote, and, quote, public sector entrepreneurs, end quote. That's what big government buys you. And of course, we must pause to distinguish the ambitious from those motivated by a spirit of public service. De Tocqueville wrote elsewhere about good patriots, and we all know plenty of good civic hearts today. To be sure, many Americans still flock to the private sector, even knowing that they must brave ever-increasing tax and regulatory burdens. Happily, our free economy is so strong that the rewards of private sector entrepreneurship can be fantastic. So we're in a different place than we were in de Tocqueville's time. We have a big public sector and a big private sector. What does this mean for today? What does it portend for the future? For answers, we might benefit from the visit of another sage foreigner to help give us insight and perspective. Or, of course, we could look to our own traditions and history, starting with the U.S. Constitution. This essay was written by James P. Pinkerton. James P. Pinkerton served as a domestic policy aide in the White Houses of Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. He also worked in the 1980, 1984, 1988, 1992, and 2008 presidential campaigns. From 1996 to 2016, he was a contributor to the Fox News channel.